US Chess Championship 2025 features the best American chess players Fabiano Caruana, Wesley So, Levon Aronian, the one and only Hans Niemann in the open section, Alice Lee, and 8-time US champion Irina Krush in the women's section. Number of good games in round 9, and I will show you 2 of them. First, one of the leaders and the favorite to win the title, Fabiano Caruana, playing black against Sam Shankland, who is not having a great tournament with 3.5 points out of 8 coming into this game. Sam starts the game with the move e4 and c5. We have Sicilian defense. Knight f3, e6, d4, exchange of the pawns in the center, knight c6 challenging white's knight on d4, knight c3, a6 not allowing white pieces, especially the knights, to get into a square, b5, bishop e3, knight f6, developing moves, bishop d3, queen c7, all theory, queen e2. And now white has a choice whether to castle long or short. b5, immediately starting attacking. On the queen side of the board for Caruana, exchange of the knights on c6. And here, not a great decision by Sam. He plays long castle, right where Fabiano Caruana already prepared a match pawn and attack on white's king. Caruana plays bishop b7, putting some pressure on the pawn on e4. King moves away to b1, bishop e7, a3. Here is a tactical motif here to take the pawn on a3, deflect pawn b from protecting the knight, and if pawn takes bishop, queen takes c3, black has an extra pawn and pretty much a winning position. The problem here, it doesn't work because of the intermediate move e5, attacking the knight. And now the knight is under attack and nowhere to go. Because if it goes to d5, then the whole idea is not working because there is no more knight on c3. And if the knight from f6 goes back to, let's say, g8, white is winning by the move bishop e4, attacking the queen. Queen has to go away, exchange of the bishops, and again taking the bishop on a3 because the queen is no longer on the c file to take the knight. Just something to keep in mind for future reference, that in this position bishop a3 was not good, but in general that's an idea. Queen goes back to c7, bishop goes back to d2, defending the knight on c3, not allowing. Bishop takes a3 now, castle, h4, Sam starts attacking on the king side of the board, d5, immediate strike on the center, multiple exchanges on the squares d5, and bishop c3. And here it's an important moment again in the game, because now bishop takes e3, that idea works. And if b takes a3, queen takes c3, and black simply winning. But again, there is a problem, and the problem is that white can force a draw here. With the move bishop takes h7, sacrificing the bishop. King takes h7, queen h5 check, king g8, and here bishop takes g7, sacrificing another bishop. So what's the point? The point is that after king takes g7, there is a perpetual check. Black cannot escape checks, and the game would end in a draw. And obviously Fabiano Caruana, one of the leaders of the tournament, playing against Sam Shankland, did not want the draw, and that's why bishop a3 wasn't considered. He played instead f5, blocking light square bishop for white. Rook h3, interesting idea, possibly rerouting the rook to g3, attacking the pawn on g7. Rook d8, g4. g4 trying to open g file for possibly another rook. Caruana doesn't allow this to happen, simply plays bishop f6, exchange of the bishops on f6, and exchange of the pawns on f5 and rook e3, trying to penetrate into a square e8. Caruana doesn't allow this to happen with the move bishop f7. Sam plays rook e5. Computer thinks this position is absolutely even, and it is. Queen d6, rook e1, tripling the forces on the e file. Queen d4 for Caruana. He attacks the pawn on h4, gives up the pawn on f5, and Sam takes the pawn on f5 with the bishop. Queen takes h4 and f3. Fabiano Caruana plays queen f4, attacking the bishop on f5 with the rook and the queen. And after queen e4, everything is protected. Exchange of the queens, bishop takes e4. Position is absolutely even. Slight advantage to black because the pawn on f3 is weak. g6, king c1, king g7, a4. Sacrificing the pawn, it wasn't really necessary. Fabiano took the pawn, rook a5. The problem is that after bishop e8, everything is protected. The pawn on a6 by the rook, the pawn on a4 by the bishop. So black has an extra pawn. And slightly better chances, but not much. Rook c5, h5. c4, king h6, rook g1, and bishop f7. King c2, rook g8, rook a1 attacking the pawn on a4. In this particular moment, Fabiano Caruana doesn't care about that pawn and plays g5. And now we can understand why his position is becoming more dangerous, because those passing pawns on g5 and h5 are becoming quite dangerous. Rook takes a4. Now white has equalized the material. And g4. And that move, actually, it was too fast for Caruana. He only had 3 minutes left on the clock and rushed with this decision. The best move for black in this position was bishop g6. Not easy to find, not easy to understand why this is the best move. But after g4 and exchange of the pawns on g4, this position is dead even. 2 rooks against 2 rooks, bishop against bishop, 2 pawns against 2 pawns. Nothing really can prevent this from being a draw. But Sam Shankland is not having a good tournament. With 15 minutes to go on the clock, he makes a critical mistake, plays a logical move, bishop b7, attacks the pawn on a6, and that pawn cannot be protected. It actually can be protected with the only move, rook g6, and the position becomes, again, totally drawish. But after bishop b7, Caruana wins the game on a spot. And the winning combination starts with the move bishop g6 check. White's king cannot go to b3, because if it goes to b3, there would be rook b6 check, and black wins the bishop. So rook d2, another check. King e2, another check from the rook d4, king e1, rook e6 check, king f2, rook d2 check, king g3, rook d3 check, another check, and rook b6. And it turns out that the bishop is under attack and the pawn is under attack. Yes, the bishop is much more important, but in this position, you cannot protect your bishop. If white tries to do this and plays bishop d5, for example, there would be a checkmate after a rook takes b2, king e1, not allowing immediate rook d1 checkmate, rook e3, king d1, and a rook g3. And there is a checkmate either from g1 or from b1 later. So this cannot be. There is no protection, no defense from the checkmate, and therefore black wins the game. Therefore, Sam Shankland decides to give up on the bishop because he had no choice. He plays b4, rook takes b7, and Fabiano Caruana easily cruises to victory because of the extra bishop. Another check, rook g3, rook takes a6, seemingly creating an important and the pin that could be problematic, but it's not. Caruana plays h4, and white resigns. Resigns because there is no way to stop the pawn from being promoted to a queen, and pawn on b4 or c4 is too far away from queening, and an extra piece obviously decides the game. So Sam Shankland resigned, Fabiano Caruana won the game, and now has 6.5 points out of 9. Let's take a look at the standings. After this win and with 2 rounds left in the tournament, Fabiano Caruana is sole leader with 6.5 points out of 9. Wesley So is second, half a point behind, and Levon Aronian is third with 5.5 points out of 9. In the women's section, critical game, most important of the round 9, was between Anna Zatonskih, international master, and Alice Lee, also international master. Difficult to understand how she's not a grandmaster yet, but I'm sure it's coming soon. Anna Zatonskih has 5 out of 8 coming into this game, and Alice Lee has 6 out of 8. So the game is very important. Anna starts with d4, d5, c4, e6, knight c3, and Alice takes the pawn on c4, giving white the center. With the move e4, now white has very good center with the pawns on d4 and e4, and Alice immediately strikes against that center with c5. d5, knight f6, bishop takes c4, exchange of the pawns on d5, and in this position, and this is move 8, white already has a pretty considerable advantage right from the opening. So something went pretty much wrong for Alice in the opening. a6, not allowing any pieces to get to b5, and also preparing the move b5 by herself. Knight develops to f3, and here I just want to show you an interesting variation. If black plays b5, that's not a good move, but not because of anything else, but castle. Actually, the best move for white is castle here, sacrificing the bishop on c4, believe it or not. Check by the rook, bishop e7 is the only move, and d6, getting back the pinned bishop, and totally winning position for white. So therefore b5 is not good in this position, bishop d6, queen e2 check, and this is pretty critical moment of the game as well. Queen e7, definitely the best move in the position, offering exchange of the queens, but Alice Lee is an aggressive player. She probably didn't want to exchange the queen so early in the game and play for a draw. She plays bishop e7, and this move doesn't look right. The bishop moves back to e7, it's pinned. Anna castles, castle for black, and rook e1, putting immediate pressure on that bishop on e7. Here, the best move was just move the bishop back to d6. Instead, Alice played rook e8, which is another mistake. So mistakes come one after another for Alice, and definitely something is wrong in this opening choice. Bishop g5, and you can easily see why white's position is so much better. They have all pieces in the game. There is a very big development advantage for white. Black pieces are pretty much all on the last rank, and also this spin is kind of annoying for black. Alice placed knight d7. Here, Anna played a4, but the best move was knight e4, continuing to put pressure on black's position. And here, important to notice that knight takes e4 immediately loses to queen takes e4, and now we can see the importance of this pin. But bishop on g7, on e7 cannot be protected. Bishop g5 doesn't work because queen takes e8. So knight e4 was pretty much winning on the spot. a4 was too slow. Anna plays h6. And here, believe it or not, the best move for white again is knight e4, sacrificing the bishop. And after that, d6. And if bishop goes back, knight takes f6. I'm sorry, not knight f6, but even more beautiful, bishop takes f7 check, sacrificing the bishop. So now white is without two pieces, but after knight takes g5 check, king g8, queen c4 check, it turns out that white wins a queen. Knight f7 with the fork. So this would have been a beautiful combination. Unfortunately, it didn't happen in the game. After h6, Anna just played solid and moved back with the bishop without even thinking. So she didn't even consider this very nice variation. Bishop d6, opening the file for the rook. Queen goes away. Knight e5. Alice is unraveling her position a little bit and things are looking better and better. Bishop takes e5, d6. Pretty critical moment of the game. Anna sacrifices the pawn in order to open up the bishop, in order to open up the square d5 for the knight, possibly. But the idea wasn't the best. Simply queen takes d6. Black has an extra pawn and not much to worry about, although rook d1, white continues to have a big development advantage, but gives up another pawn. Bishop h2 takes h2 check, king h1, exchange of the rooks. And here all Alice had to do is develop another piece with bishop g4. And pretty much with no problems, actually with two extra pawns. Instead, she played bishop e5. That was another mistake. And the mistake was because of the next move. And finally, Anna plays the move knight e4 that computer recommended many times in the past. So knight takes knight e4, knight takes e4, queen takes e4. Bishop is under attack by the queen and the rook. Queen d4. Here white has to be very careful. They cannot take the bishop on e5 because they will lose two bishops. Check, and queen takes c4 and we'll have an extra piece. Obviously Anna sees that and plays f4. Exchange of the queens, and bishop takes b2. And now let's take a look at this position. Black has three extra pawns. Three. 6 against 3. Rook against rook, two bishops against two bishops. So three extra pawns. And white has a better position. And the reason is after rook e8 check, king h7, bishop takes f7, turns out that all white pieces, all three of them, are active and well coordinated. And black's pieces, unfortunately, are in total disarray. Dark square bishop is playing. Light square bishop cannot even enter the game because the rook on a8 would be under attack. So the rook and the bishop are pretty much not participating in the game, standing sad on the squares where they started the game. And therefore, white's position is much, much better, but still not winning. g5, sacrificing the pawn and trying to open up some files. Bishop takes g5, and now Alice had to play b5. She had to play b5 or b6. b5 is better. In order to, with the next move, play bishop b7, protect the rook, and untie herself from this trap. But she didn't play b5. She played bishop d4 and pretty much lost the game right there. Because after bishop d5, now you cannot really untangle yourself because the pawn on b7 now is pinned, and you cannot play b5, you cannot play b6, you will lose the rook. The rest of the game was pretty easy to understand. It was just a pretty simple conversion. A lot of moves still were made, but again, the main idea of the position remains that black are playing without a bishop and without a rook, and they have no moves. There were some couple of more interesting moments in this game that I'm going to show you. For example, here, after rook b8, there is an idea to play bishop d6, protect the rook, and then bishop d7, and again, black would not have a problem, but Anna immediately cancels that idea with bishop c7, and the rook has to go back to a8. Then g5, the pawn is just going forward to become a queen, and Alice, in desperation, decides to sacrifice the bishop for this pawn. Bishop takes g5, and the idea here is if all the pieces disappear from the board and the only pieces would remain are the kings, the bishop on c7, and the pawn on a5, that would be a draw because the promotion square for the pawn is white, but the white bishop is dark square, and that is a theoretical draw. But if that would happen if all the pieces would disappear from the board. Obviously, Anna has other plans. She doesn't even take the bishop on g5. She plays bishop g4 check and takes the bishop on c8 instead. And now bishop on g5 is still under attack by the rook. And the other threat is discovery check. Bishop e6 check and taking the rook with the next move. So the king has to go from the light square to a dark square to prevent that, to prevent losing the rook. And Alice plays king d4 check and king c3. Again, the king cannot go to a light square because of those discovery checks attacks. And now again, if white takes the bishop on g5, black would take on c8. White's position would still be winning, but it would be very difficult to convert that position into an actual win. So therefore, white doesn't even take the bishop on g5. Anna plays king f3 and is moving her king towards black's rook. So after those moves, we can see that the black rook remains trapped. And decisive move of the game, actually not decisive, but pretty much the final nail in the coffin, is bishop c7. And it turns out that black bishop does not have any moves. It cannot go to g1 because it would be taken, grabbed by the rook. And so the only move remaining would be to exchange the bishops. And if Alice does that, after king takes c7, white would win the rook, because if the rook doesn't have any moves, let's say rook a7, king b8, and the rook is trapped. In this position, Alice played king b4, check, king b5, another check, and here Alice resigned, because with the next move, bishop takes h2, two extra bishops, and even more importantly, the rook still is trapped. So white wins the game, and it was a critical win for Anna Zatonskih. And after this win, let's take a look at the standings. After 9 rounds, we have 3 leaders with 6 points out of 9, Carissa Yip, Alice Lee, and Anna Zatonskih, followed by 3 players with 5.5 points. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.